Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk HR. Now, today we thought we would go movie themed by talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly side of HR. Many people, whether you work in HR directly, whether you've had exposure to HR, will probably have one of these three opinions when it comes to HR, because people will either say HR just fire people, HR are there for the employee well-being and stuff like that, or normally when an organization change happens, redundancy, stuff like that, the ugly side of HR, that is pretty much when we're pulled in front of everyone, front and center stage, normally in the worst of situations. So to try and navigate what the good, the bad, and the ugly is, to really help you get a good holistic picture of what a HR professional does, I'm joined by Wendy McCartney here today. Are you ready to delve into the chaos that is?
I sure am. Let's do it.
Now, Wendy, you specialize in burnout specifically, don't you, as well? So, I mean, it's a topic that we're touching on again soon, but this type of chaos probably has high risk of burnout, especially if you're in the bad and the ugly side for quite a long period of time. So I assume you probably speak to quite a lot of HR professionals, because who regulates the regulators?
Absolutely. You tend to find when they're doing lots of complex and the bad and the ugly, and it continues over a long period of time, they definitely do burn out. Yes.
Now, we will not talk about burnout in much detail because we've got a specific section on that, and we want you to tune into that one. But let's start with the good side of things.
Sure.
Now, I picked four. You may have a couple, but the first one, employee engagement. It's CIPD survey 2020 found that organizations with high employee engagement outperform those with low employee engagement. And employee engagement is one of the critical elements of a HR professional. How important and how enjoyable can getting involved in positive employee engagement be for a HR professional, Wendy?
Yeah, I think it could be very positive, because when you're making an influence on making people feel more engaged, it can be a really positive experience when you see, for example, if you do surveys and you see those numbers going up, and you know that you've made a valuable contribution to that organization, because, as you say, research shows that those who have a high employee engagement score and do better, and probably financially better. And when you, as an HR professional, if you have contributed to that, that feels good. You have made a difference within that organization.
Yeah, well, I found a stat the other day, which was for every £1 that you spend on HR, they generate £9 return, which,
Wow.
again, now I'm not sure how much in the context of cost and things like that, but that was what they found out. So really, if you've got a really engaged set of staff, you've got a really good HR team that is responsive and ready to listen, because I think that's the critical part of employee engagement. It's not about HR saying, this is what we're going to do, let's have Pizza Friday. I hate Pizza Friday, but let's get people together. Let's listen. Listening is the critical part of employee engagement, isn't it? It's not just about the parties, booking Christmas do or anything like that.
No, I would agree with that. I think you need to listen to what would help our employees feel better about being engaged in the workplace, and that capability to truly understand what people need. And you'll get different people needing different things, and how can you balance all those aspects and give a nice broad service that can help those individuals. And also, sometimes you may, it's not sticking to this is the set of things we have. Sometimes you deviate from that. Sometimes you're flexible, because if somebody's really good at their job, you want to retain them. Therefore, you want to be a bit more flexible in how you deal with certain situations.
Yeah, I've had a few conversations, like benefits, for example. We were talking about unlimited holidays and how that actually creates situation where people feel guilty to take holidays and stuff like that because no one else is taking holidays. And sometimes it's about trial and error and testing things, but you're right, it's that responsiveness to it. Now, the next one we've got is the wellbeing initiatives, and actually I want to say it's a privilege. It's a privilege and a curse at times to be the person that is responsible for ensuring that people who turn up to work are being well looked after. They're being, they're not. If HR are the managers of discretionary effort, as people refer to it as, HR's job is to make sure that that's not taken advantage of, and that can be quite rewarding to ensure that people have that healthy balance between work and personal and everything that they need, can't it?
Absolutely. It's a very rewarding area to be in, and I think that a lot of HR professionals who are involved in that wellbeing space really enjoy it and thrive in it, and you're making a difference again to how people feel and inside work and outside work, because that old, the old kind of statement that, keep your personal life outside of work. Well, I just don't think that's possible. If something's really going on in your personal life, you're going to bring it into work, because if your family's having a challenge or something's going on with you, anxiety, depression, any of those aspects, you're going to bring that into the workplace, and we can contribute as HR professionals to supporting that individual and enabling them to continue to do their job to the best they can.
Yeah, and we're recording this the day after World Mental Health Day, and what you say is completely right. If you think about a person that is going through a massive personal struggle, a massive personal challenge, now in a world where we've got hybrid working now, they might just be at home, not engaging with anyone, not saying, they might just live by themselves. Don't bring your personal life to work. So you see people just sort of regress away, don't you, from live chats to instant messaging, and they're just suffering in silence because we've got this 1930s opinion of you will be this brick wall of just company when you're here and you'll go home and everything, and it's not like that anymore, really, is it?
No, you have to understand that people bring their whole selves to work, and that will also mean that they bring aspects where they're struggling, and that will impact their work and their outputs. Therefore, if you don't support that individual and listen carefully to them, because sometimes it's a very simple solution and it just enables that individual to work and feel better about themselves. It doesn't always have to be something big. It can be something really small, more flexibility, adapting their work for a short period of time while they go through that difficult phase, and then bringing them back in a staged return so that they feel comfortable coming back to the workplace. There are simple things I think HR professionals can do and do to make sure that people will feel, supported back into the workplace so they can deliver. And when you do those sorts of things for people, it's amazing the return you get back.
Yeah, I think so often it's just something as simple as just ranting about something. Just get it out of your head. You've got it in. It's taking over your thoughts. You can't focus on it. Just being able to rant to someone and go, right, this is all the things that are bothering me at the moment. They don't even need to give a solution. Sometimes it's just about freeing up space in your own head because you've said it out loud. And you make such a good point in terms of it's bringing your whole self to work. People take it as this hipster word and stuff like. Well, it's not. It's just about being able to feel comfortable in your own skin when you're in work, be who you are, so that actually it doesn't feel like you're living 2-3 separate lives or anything like that. When you've got to be this when you're at home, you've got to be this in front of your parents, you've got to be this. Well, actually just be yourself constantly, and people will mold and adapt to it.
Yeah,
so completely. Yeah, it's a really good point.
And and sometimes you're right. It's just sitting, listening to somebody, and letting them say what they need to say, and not passing judgment on that. And just that we have 2 ears in society, but quite often there's not a lot of listening goes on there. So I think as HR professionals, if we can do that well, that's going to be a real bonus.
No, I'm happy with this stat, and I'm also a little bit sad, but overall I'm happy, which is research shows that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity in their executive team are 25% more likely to experience an above average profitability than companies in the lower quartile. And why that's an amazing stat from an organization perspective and progress and everything we want to see. It's a really low percentage of data. So there's a really small group of companies that are that level of inclusive at this moment in time. So we talk about diversity and inclusion, equality, equity, and making things even, and equal opportunities. You've got gender pay gaps now being publicised every year, and that's gone from 12% of females in the boardroom in 2011 to 33% in 2021, which is progress, and that's good, but it's still only 33%, and there's still room that we can grow, and there's other minorities and disabilities at work, and we've got horrible stats like only 22% of people with autism actually get employed and stuff going around at the moment. So there's so much positive work we can get involved in, and there's so much of this positive data, but there's also it's like a balance for me. It's the good side getting involved in fixing these types of things, but it's also just shows you how much work there is to do in terms of leveling the playing fields.
I completely agree. There's been a lot of focus and driving women in the workplace and promoting them and making them more successful. And there's certainly lots of external organisations driving that. And in HR, we can support that and influence managers in order to make those changes. And you're right, when it comes to learning disabilities or disabilities, we have a lot of work to do to make sure we bring those numbers up. And I have worked in organisations where we have a lot of neurodiverse people, and we have great equity models, and actually you see a huge difference and how people work, and when they're managing teams, they understand when their teams are struggling because they themselves have struggled sometimes. And these people are valuable resources, and we need to see them as bringing real positives. So some, like MI5, for example, specifically targets people with dyslexia because they are fantastic at seeing patterns. So they actually actively hire people like that with dyslexia. As I am someone who has dyslexia, it's great to see organisations doing that because lots shy away. But the women agenda, what we've got to remember is women going into the workplace has been quite a lot. It's not been that long a time in comparison to men. So it will take time to push that up, and it will take time to change that. As with other groups, we really have a lot of work to do there, I think, particularly when it comes to race or disabilities. I still think there's a lot of work to be done in those two areas.
Yeah, I think unconscious bias is something that we need to talk about more. I think people need to get more comfortable to accept that you have unconscious biases, and that's it's not a slur on your character.
Absolutely.
I think when people start to refer to it as privilege, that's when people start to get tetchy, where actually it's just unconscious biases. So you look at, for example, someone in an interview, and if you go, oh, they remind me of my niece, they remind me of my friend, because of the social circles you're in, you're going to have these unconscious biases.
Of course. Being
aware of that allows you to think, well, actually, is this an unconscious bias, or is this other person who I have no frame of reference or understanding or cultural understanding for technically better? And actually having that challenge to yourself is valuable. And you're so right. I mean, the good side is we're able to have these conversations and bring these conversations to senior leaders, directors, to actually make them stop and think, as opposed to, saying that all these are problems. These are good conversations to have, and these are conversations that should be had all the time, aren't they, Wendy?
I completely agree. And I think that some managers and leaders are scared to have these conversations. They're worried what the ramifications could be, and that they don't know. A lot of people don't want to show that they don't know the answer, particularly when you're senior, because, you're supposed, you don't need to, but there's a kind of conception that and perception that you should know all the answers. And to put your hand up and say, I have no idea how to deal with this, I don't know what the right thing to say is anymore. And that makes people really nervous, I think.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's something that we need to address in terms of just generally in the workplace, where just saying I don't know is more common than some sort of management, like, well, you need to work it out and something like that. I don't get why people feel the need to be able to answer all questions. I teach HR for a living and stuff like that, and I definitely don't know all the answers because I have different people on this every week. But you know what I mean? Some people just feel that innate pressure to always have an answer to a question. And it's a real shame.
Yeah, it is, because if you can ask people, right? If you're not sure, ask somebody what they prefer, and they will freely tell you. They don't feel inhibited to tell you how they would like you to refer to things, how they'd like you to deal with things. And asking just, in HR, we can facilitate that. Just ask the question, and then you'll know exactly how to deal with this particular circumstance. And it's getting over that kind of need to know the answers would really make a big difference.
Now, the final good one, which obviously I'm a massive pro of, is learning and development. As a training company, big shock. 68% of workers in the UK say that training and development opportunities greatly influence their decision to stay with the company, and it highlights HR's role in staff retention. And staff retention is a big thing because recruitment is very expensive.
Yes.
Especially when you factor in not just a recruitment consultant's cost, which is what most people do, when you factor in onboarding, up to speed, the person that's leaving, their disengagement, how they downgrade, and how the other person, you take the whole process of finding, interviewing, management time, management interview times and stuff like that. Take that whole process, it's very expensive. And actually something as simple as learning and development can often be an absolute saving for an organization for a small investment, because people want to improve, people want to do their job better. I think learning and development and getting involved in that from a HR side of things is really rewarding when you see someone go from entry level in an organization to, a manager, a senior manager, or something like that, and they work their way through.
I would agree with that. I think, learning and development and giving people the skills and to grow and manage their own career and progress throughout the organisation as an HR professional, I think that's really important, that we enable that by supplying the right courses at the right time for people to grow, and that is technical skills as well as soft skills, and delivering those two things to give people the opportunity to progress within the organisation is important.
Yeah, people think there's not life as they used to refer to them as, in organisations anymore, where people just get a job and then just stay there for life. But I use my wife as an example. She started as a second assistant, not the main assistant, the assistant to the assistant, and now she's the head. She's one of the heads in the hospital, and that's just progression, work, understanding, evidence, build, grow, and that's what HR should be doing. They should be nurturing the leaders and recruiting people at the lower levels and bringing people through where they can. Obviously, you're always going to potentially need to go external, but that self-fulfilling, self-promoting, identifying the leaders of tomorrow, giving them the external influences to improve themselves through education and training is just such a more rewarding process than going, we need a new finance director. Oh, we'll just go hire one.
Yeah, I agree. And I have done that many times in organisations as an HR professional, where they had an external focus and brought them back into an internal focus. And I think if you want to retain talent, you're going to have to progress them quicker through the organisation. And if that's what they want, because some people don't want to be, some people want to stay where they are. Some people, the external life drives staying where they are, and you want to reward them appropriately to keep them happy within that role. And others want to accelerate their promotions. And we as HR professionals, I think, have to listen to those people, know who those people are, and facilitate that change for them. And that's learning, development, and also creating opportunities sometimes where they don't exist.
I completely agree. And we're going to move on to the bad side of HR. And I think probably sticking with the learning and development, if we talk about one of the things on the bad side is the lack of personalization. We often talk really openly about people moving up the ladder, progressing up the ladder, growing your career, taking that step into management. What do you want to be? Oh, and you mentioned it there, which is just status quo. Actually, you've got a good balance and you're happy. And the other conversation we don't have on the bad side of HR is we don't talk about going down the ladder, and that being okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes, sickness, illness, family, work, balance, you might want to take a couple of steps down the ladder for a period of time and to just find your feet again. And for me, I think there's very few conversations about taking a couple of steps down the ladder until someone's at retirement age.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think that's perceived as a positive thing in some organisations. Some are better at it than others, but I agree. I think that lateral moves, status quo, and moving upward is talked about a lot more than moving down. And I've only really worked in one organisation that did have those conversations. All the others I have worked in never had those conversations. So I think you're absolutely right there.
And the other time we do see it happen, probably more than we need, is when people come back from maternity leave. Within 3 years of people coming back from maternity leave, 70% of people leave, which is a horrible bit of data.
Yeah, it's not good.
I saw someone share that runs a maternity wellbeing back to work charity, and that was the research, which is people either got demoted or left within 3 years, 70% within 3 years of coming back from maternity, which was a horrible statistic. And that's not what I mean when I talk about moving down the ladder. Oh, you've got a child, you should move down the ladder. No, what I'm talking about is let's say someone you really care for is, ill, and you need to work 4 days a week for half a year because you want to help and support. That's what I talk about, moving down the ladder, not just because you've had a child. And I think a lot of the time we talk about, you talk about something what people may perceive as negative, and there's groups that are done wrong by that, so you can't talk about it. But actually, acknowledging the differences is really important.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think we have to, as an HR profession, is have those conversations and allow people to do that. Because I think historically we've done it for our superstars and our high performers, but I'm not sure it's applied across the board.
Yeah. Now, this is a really interesting one, which is the bad side of HR, which is a slow response time, which over 60% of HR inquiries in the UK take longer than 24 hours to solve, leading to employee frustration. No, I don't know if this is bad on the HR side. I don't know if it's bad on the expectation side. I don't know if it's just bad on communication side. But do people just want things immediately? Where do you stand on responding to things? Is it just about better communication all the way through, or is it about actually just going, well, yes, I've got a problem, and it's most problems where I need HR, it's not going to be solved immediately?
Yeah, I think it can be across all of those areas, and it depends on, my view is that something simple, you should get back to them within 8 hours. If it's a really simple thing you can just answer, just get straight back. Don't sit and wait on it, because there will come a time where you'll need them to get back to you very quickly. And if you have fulfilled that, you will get the same response back. And I also think it depends on the size of your team. Are you overburdened with managers who are perhaps not doing their jobs to the same capacity, and you're filling in for them and managing a lot of team aspects? I think it's contextual is probably what I'm trying to say. But I do think some people just sit on stuff and procrastinate rather than just going straight back and answering, because there are some things you can deal with in an hour. There's some things you can deal in 5 minutes. There's some things you can deal with and it takes a week. It really depends on the nature. But I do think there's a lot of people in HR who are quite perhaps detail orientated and need to just think about that and get back. So again, it's quite a complex. I know I'm giving you a complex answer because I don't think it's black and white.
No, I get it. I think about times where I've been on the phone with HR and I'm going, okay, well, how many days holiday is it going to cost us in terms of this person leaving? How much have they accrued and stuff like that? And they're like, well, you've got to submit a ticket.
All right.
And obviously, I know it's right there in front of them.
Wow.
I get that's frustrating. Well, it's not. There's got to do a quick calculation because we did it on 7.5 hours. So you had a total amount of hours, and basically you have to type in a calculator 7.5 divided by whatever the number was. And I get some people, and some HR departments are targeted so heavily on closed tickets. You must close this many tickets per day. So to answer any question, you've got to submit a ticket because we're tracked on this metric and this performance of tickets closed, tickets closed, tickets closed. So everything is submit a ticket. And that's sometimes when analytics goes a bit too far. You're tracking everyone all these performance metrics, and that's why certain things may feel like they've been rushed, or you're getting walls put up. But it's trying to demonstrate value. Anytime anyone creates these situations of tickets closed and stuff like that, what HR leadership are trying to do is demonstrate value and what they bring and how much support they give to the organization. But it can sometimes be frustrating for everyone, really, whether you're the person on the other end of the phone going, you're going to have to submit a ticket, to the person doing that.
I have to say that I, as an HR professional, I think that I would never implement a ticket system, and I never have done, because these are humans, and we can demonstrate value by working out somebody's seat charge and their charge within the organisation, and whether we retain them or they leave the organisation. And there's a number of ways you can demonstrate value. I don't think closing tickets, that's good for IT. And it's good for other things, but not people. I don't think. That's my opinion.
No, I completely agree. And probably the biggest area or the bad side of HR, in terms of how we do this right and how this is managed and how it's always mismanaged, and I always find HR are always stuck in the middle of this, is feedback and limited feedback. Yeah. So when HR are normally responsible for the annual review, where everyone's got annual appraisal, everyone fills out their forms and stuff like that. But every time, like, you end up in if there's not regular feedback culture within an organization, what you tend to find is when someone's got, I've got a problem with this employee. Okay, well, have you taken any notes? Have you got any evidence? Have you done anything? Have you given them feedback? Oh yeah, I've done all that. Great. Can you send it to me? Oh, I don't have anything written down. And you're in this horrible situation, and this is a bad side of HR, where you're trying to help someone manage a situation. Okay, you're not happy with this employee for whatever reason, and there's no evidence, so you have to come in and sort of really manage that process with the manager. And you don't know who's right or wrong in this situation because there's no evidence or anything like that. But for that employee who's being performance managed, it feels like you're on the manager's side of things, and actually you're just trying to ensure that everything's done correctly. And you're in this horrible situation, I often find, where because they don't have a consistent feedback culture, because there isn't that open communication, because there isn't that evidence, that you're having to guide a manager through a process with the employee feeling like they're getting done to by HR because the manager hasn't done the process. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I understand exactly what you're saying. And I agree. I think, as an HR professional, we have to step back a little bit. And I have certainly done that in my career, where I've said to people, I can hold your hand for the next month, but what you have to understand is that's all you're getting. And from thereforth in, after the month, I won't be holding your hand anymore. And you have to take responsibility for it. Now, if you don't do the performance improvement plans or whatever it is properly, well, we have to restart them again, because if you don't, and it all sits with you. And I push, and maybe it's just the way I work. I have a clock down time for how long I'm willing to help them, and then they have to start doing it themselves. And then if I have to performance manage them because they're not doing it, well, so be it. Because I don't believe you get stuck in the middle of that, you're going to get pulled in all directions, and you're not going to do the stuff you really enjoy. That's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah, and I often find people avoid the difficult conversation in this. Instead of the manager saying, look, I'm really not happy with your performance and stuff like that, what the manager tends to go, well, your data's not, your sales haven't been up to the level, so HR have said that we're going to have to start to do this process, and I'm going to have to manage you and stuff like that. So then HR's painted as a bad guy, which is fine. I'll happily be the bad guy for anyone. But people not having enough confidence to have their difficult conversations to actually be able to manage, or if you just come to HR and say, how do I have this really hard conversation? It makes things so much better, because I think people come at it then with bad intentions, as opposed to this performance development plan is to help you get up to speed so that you can achieve your job, so that you can meet and exceed the expectations of the job, so you can be happy, your manager can be happy, everyone can be happy. But instead it's turned into this witch hunt, which really bugs me.
Yeah, and I get that too, right? Because the reason we do these things is to improve people's performance, and I have witnessed that many a time where I've seen, not even somebody just been told, look, you need to improve your performance, and they just change. And so, and I've seen that happen many times. But what you describe, I have also seen, which is managers are using it as a tool to get somebody out the door because they don't want them in their team anymore. And as an HR professional, I think we have a responsibility to go, okay, what specifically is going on here? What specifically has happened? When did it start to happen? And really drill down on the manager for really hardcore evidence and why they've made that decision. Because again, that thing you talked about, unconscious bias, I have witnessed that on many occasions where this person's probably a slightly better performer and the manager is being shown up by that individual, and that sometimes can perpetuate them wanting to get them out the door. And I think as an HR professional, me and other HR professionals out there, we have to say to the manager, no, wait a minute here, but there's insufficient evidence and I don't think that we're going down the right path here. And how can we ensure that this person is given the right support so that they can perform? And we have to feel confident at times to challenge people, because in the long term, if you want HR to have a good reputation in the business, people need to understand you're willing to challenge the status quo. You're willing to challenge people who don't behave appropriately. And if you can demonstrate that, it's going to improve your reputation throughout the organization. And you just do one thing and it ripples throughout the whole organization.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a story. Make sure that I don't drop anyone in it. But I was working for an organization, and someone was on long-term sick, so they weren't well. And they almost got to the stage where they came back to work for a couple of days, but it just got worse again. And unfortunately, they went back off sick. Now, what their line manager did is they emailed HR to say, I don't care what we have to do. I want this person gone and I want them out of the business immediately. Now, what they forgot to do was email HR, and they actually sent that email direct to the said employee.
Oh,
yeah. Now, the bad side of HR is having to come in at the 11th hour and go, how do you manage this? So this was a really bad situation. Now, obviously, the employee decided that they couldn't work for this organization anymore, and then you're in a mediation in terms of compensation for them, because obviously they can't come back to the employers and the employee and stuff like that, and you're having those conversations with senior managers and stuff like that, because a manager's got frustrated because someone's health, which they can't control, and HR, that's the bad side for me. You get stuck in these situations where something really bad's happened and there's no good outcome. And unfortunately, not in all HR situations, there's not always a good outcome. And this was one of those where it was a bad outcome for everybody. It's a bad outcome for the business, which you're employed to represent, because it's going to cost them a lot of money. It's a bad outcome for that poor employee who left the organization in a horrible way by what a manager said to them, and also, they had health concerns and issues and things that were creating them problem. And it was bad for the manager because their senior managers were like, well, look at how bad you are at managing a difficult situation. So for me, the bad side of HR is sometimes you can have a lose, and it's not even a win for HR because nobody's really benefited. So it's something to bear in mind if you're choosing this as a career. Sometimes you will lose on all angles, and that's okay.
Yeah, you do need a bit of grit in HR, because you will have lose situations, and I have had plenty of them in my life. I'll give you a story as well where we were making redundancies, and the criteria we'd set for the redundancies all looked reasonably well, without any diversity or inclusion issues. We had really thought about it very carefully over a long period of time. But a manager had manipulated some of the data on their side to let go of a couple of people, but made it look good. And the only reason we discovered that was we were out socially after we discussed what we were going to be doing with his team. And he mentioned, well, I don't really like that person. And I thought to myself, okay, wait a minute here. So you don't like that person and they're on your list. So is this true? What's really going on? And then I interviewed the person who was on the list, and they told me exactly what was going on and how they were being treated. And we had to have quite a challenging conversation with the manager. But that person left because they knew they were on the list. They knew they were going to get the job, but they got another job and left. And these are the situations you have to deal with in HR.
No, if we've not put you off by now with the bad side, we're going to move on to the ugly side.
Generally, it's generally a good job, trust me. But you need to be tough.
In 2020, there were 30,000 discrimination cases in the UK for employment tribunals highlighting ongoing challenges. And I think discrimination cases, that's the ugly side of HR, because that's normally at the point where people are in conflict, you're in situations where, as we've just discussed, multiple lose-lose situations where someone's being mistreated, there's a manager that's being mistreated, and then there's some abuse of power at times. In a lot of discrimination cases, it's an abuse of power, it's an abuse of position and stuff. And it's never it's an ugly part of the job, and it's never an enjoyable part of the job trying to go through these types of situations, because even if you're able to, shall we say, fix the manager, the senior person problem and get that resolved, there is still something that's happened for it to get to a discrimination case, isn't it, Wendy?
I agree. It's never good when we get to that situation in HR, and I think we can only do so much because unfortunately we are not able to control every manager's behaviour in the workplace. So you are going to have managers that do these sorts of things, and you don't always find out until ACAS contacts you to say, we're going to mediate, and you have had no idea this has been going on, and you have to pick it up from that point. And you can't manage everyone, and you're going to get these sorts of things that happen. However, there definitely is, I've been working in HR now for 20 years, and I still hear people complaining about middle managers and senior managers being the root of the problem. 20 years later, it's still being talked about. So I suppose you can't solve everything, but if you can do anything, target those groups with development and how to have conversations and how to manage their people, because those are the ones that will make the biggest difference. But you can't solve everything.
I completely agree with the middle management side, and and the reason it can get such an ugly part of HR's job is if you think about what a middle manager is, they're getting pressure from below because people are not happy about something. So you've got this people going, oh, we want this, we want this, we want this, and then they've got this pressure from above, from senior leaders and other middle managers saying you're not good enough and these people need to do this, and they're getting pressed and pressed and pressed. And a lot of the time these middle managers, it's their first managerial experience, so they're still learning how to be a good manager. And as you'll all know, from any time you've learned to do anything for the first time, you'll make wrong moves, you'll make mistakes, you'll make errors, and HR's job is to make sure that mistake, that error, isn't an irreversible situation where people, lose jobs or discrimination cases or situations, stuff like that. But you're really right. If there's a group of people that HR should really be in regular communication with, it's probably that middle manager level where they're getting pushed from both sides, and we need to ensure that they come on and they go on a journey that actually understands. Yes, we understand what the senior managers want. Yes, we understand what the employees want. But we also, like HR, have to do what is best for the organisation and communicate in a clear and concise manner to ensure everyone gets to be. But you're right, it's the middle managers that probably accidental managers, as they're often referred to by CMI as well, which is, you top performer and then they're the best performer, let's make them a manager. And they're just thrown in, aren't they? Like,
yes,
the 80s swimming methodology, just throw them in the deep end and they'll learn how to swim.
Yeah, there's no blame here, because we, you're right. So just because somebody is brilliant at their job doesn't mean they're going to be brilliant at management, because sometimes technically brilliant people and people who really deliver are good at delivering for themselves and not through others. But the only way they can get progression is to manage people. And therefore, you have to really think about where are they now and how do we get them to use their skills to manage people better. And you're right, they are going to make mistakes. But if we have developed them properly and nurtured their talents as much as we possibly can, they're going to do that better, and the mistakes will be smaller. And also sometimes we have to, again, feel confident to say to a manager, that is not working. Let's look at a different way of doing that. And coach managers, ask them questions, draw out the right answers from them. Because telling them all the time will only, they become reliant on you. Whereas if you ask them questions and get them to come to the right answer, if there is such a thing, but the right thing for the time and the moment of what's happening, therefore they're going to grow as individuals. So it's not always about putting them on a management course. It can be us asking questions and growing their skills to understand how to deal with different situations.
Mentorships, progressions, like there's coaching. It doesn't have everyone just, and I'm saying this as I run a training company, obviously training number one, but just putting them with an experienced manager or a manager in another department so that they can understand the different nuances of how people go about it. Just having someone that you can have a confidential conversation with, just making those business connections together, has such a positive impact on people's working lives in terms of making better decisions and informed decisions and collective decisions. One of the concerns and that people have is people believe, and this is kind of the ugly side of HR, that there's a lack of confidentiality in HR, with 40% of UK employees believe that HR will discuss personal situations and problems with managers and leaders and other bits and pieces if people come to them. Now, obviously, there's situations where something may get brought to HR where it's so severe that you can't stay quiet in HR. It's your job to sort of escalate and protect people, protect the employees within that said organization. So sometimes you can't stay quiet. But I think it comes from some of the bad side and what we've discussed previously, where people have this belief that HR are just there for the bosses and not there for them.
Yeah, and I've heard that sort of thing before, and it doesn't surprise me that research is saying that, because I suppose what as an HR professional, it's important for us to try and balance people and the business, and that is quite a tough balance to maintain, and it's not pleasant for employees to feel worried that you are talking about their personal matters with everybody or with their manager or other leaders, because really you should be seeking their permission before you do that, and what level you should be sharing. And I'm not surprised at that, Bill, because I think it's quite a difficult place for HR to be in, to think about what's the right level of sharing here, because I want the manager to understand and be flexible with the individual. On the other side, what's important here in terms of keeping confidentiality, and that sometimes one person's view of what to share and another person's view of what confidentiality looks like will vary dramatically. And again, I think it's those open conversations and asking people. But I would imagine that sometimes somebody asks you something and you just answer without really thinking of the consequences, perhaps.
Well, a really obvious thing that comes to my mind is when someone's got a bad back and they get a specific chair within the workplace. I'm like, oh, why have you got the chair? And people are like, and they feel awkward and uncomfortable and stuff like that. And well, actually, I've just got a bad back, so I've got a specific chair for it. And it should be as simple as that. But people that you give that answer to be like, oh, well, I've got a, and they'll diminish support and stuff. And I think sometimes when HR gets involved in certain bits and pieces, people feel like it's telling tales, telling teacher. Why have you gone to HR? How couldn't you come to me, the manager, and stuff like that? And I think people struggle sometimes to just sort of differentiate that between that element of HR is here to ensure the business does the best that it possibly can.
Mm.
And the best the business possibly can do is by all its employees functioning at as near to 100% as we possibly can get them.
Absolutely.
And so that means looking after you, that means looking after the leader, that means looking after the manager, that means making sure everyone can function at their best. And unfortunately, sometimes that will not mean that we always agree with the leader, the manager, or the employees. Sometimes we will disagree, and sometimes we will have to stand at the front of the class and announce redundancies and the situation and the process and everything that's going to happen next, and be that bad cop, because that is the role that HR is employed to be in, and that kind of is the ugly side of it, really.
Yeah, and you just have to get used to that and understand that is part of the job. You can't always do the nice things you have to sometimes do the really hard stuff, and that really hard stuff could be complicated. It's like when we were talking about middle managers, getting pushed downwards from senior leaders and then getting pushed upwards. HR gets pulled sideways, diagonal wise, up and down, because you're trying to deal with everybody's queries and what everybody needs and what everybody wants. And unfortunately, you have to prioritize what is what you said, James, what is best for everyone and what's the right thing to do that's going to keep this organization thriving and the people within it. And that means sometimes you'll make a tough decision not to do something and not to support something because there's not capacity, and two, it doesn't make business sense.
Oh, God forbid you get it wrong. Because nobody can ever get it wrong.
So true.
Now, the final one, which is the difficult side probably of HR, is around 25% of HR departments in the UK have admit they're not fully prepared to address the technological advances for the future. So things like AI, things like automation, things like chatbots, and I think one of the ugly sides, and this is probably a personal reflection from myself, is I think I really like tech and gadgets and bits and pieces and AI. I've got an AI tutor that we're trialing on the course at this moment in time, and it's really interesting to me. But there's a lot of people that are really paranoid, are really scared, really in the workplace thinking I'm going to get replaced. And I think sometimes because HR stick their head in the sand about some of these technological advances, because we just deal with people, we're people, and that's it. I think not being as aware of some of these technological advances and how they can help and support and guide is creating that distrust, not between HR and employees, but the organization and employees, because HR don't have enough grip on what technology could do and how it could benefit the employee, not how it could take over the employee. And I think that's probably the biggest area I see where HR probably runs behind other areas, sales, finance, and other central marketing and other central services. What do you think? Or am I just...
No, I think you're right. I mean, I love technology, right? I'm a big AI fan. I use AI all the time. And I love systems and automations because it means that as an HR team, you don't need to sit and do letters, right? You push a button and somebody does the letter and sends it off for you, and you can focus on the conversations you need to have with managers, how you're going to solve a problem, what's the strategy, how are we achieving to the strategy, is the business financially sound, what are they doing, where are they over investing? HR can get involved in those kinds of conversations. You can only do that with using automation, AI, where we can really become strategic. And these systems, look, they will answer questions, simple questions, and if you look at AI and you look at the research in AI, it is nowhere near what people are saying it is, right? It can effectively answer a question from 2021 and not or 2022. It can't give you the most up to date. It can't learn like we can in terms of the tic-tac, I call it, of human connection. Those little nuances you notice that a person does, blinks a certain way, looks a certain way, it can't do that. It doesn't have capability. Now, it might do in the future, but it's not there. These tools will allow us to be more strategic and evolve as an HR team to do the things that really matter. So for me, it feels alien to not consider these things because it's going to make our lives easier.
Yeah, and this will probably feed into sort of the unpopular opinion part. I'm just going to stick with the AI side of things. So, I was talking to a hospital the other day, and huge backlogs. 12 months worth of backlogs into certain treatments and stuff like that. And if you wanted to see your GP, they have an app. It opens for 10 minutes a day, and then all the slots are booked up.
10 minutes a day.
That's how long it's open if you want to see a doctor that day. And the reason is there's not enough people, like enough time and people and stuff like that. And one of the things that we were discussing is potentially if you build a centralized data warehouse of all the data, of all the diagnosis and the questions and the symptoms and everything like that, and all GP practices put it together, because what a general practitioner is they're trying to diagnose a problem based on information and data.
Of course.
Actually, you could speak to an AI, it could give you a diagnosis, and the doctor could review and then further investigate the ones where he thinks he needs investigating and improve a quicker list. You could actually get through more patients, which sounds horrible speaking to an AI, but and this is a theory where it could go, but then take nurses. Well, people are always going to feel scared. People are always going to want to speak to somebody. Someone's always going to want reassurance. Someone's always going to need some human help. So what's becoming more valuable is that human-to-human connection over that diagnostic type symptom connection. And there will always be a human element in terms of people, extreme, pain. Oh, my pain's a 10. Is it? There's always going to be a human element to it. But one of the things that will always remain is people will always need people to get reassurance from people. There is no robot that is ever going to make you feel better. And it's really interesting when you start to think about, precision engineering, manufacturing, flip that into surgery, flip that into doing certain treatments and stuff like that. Maybe things like appendectomies could be done majoritively with, not that I'm saying they should be, but, and then more complicated things like brain surgeries where you're talking about millimeters and humans don't, humans could potentially shake with a low potassium and stuff like that. We're starting to come at it from a different way, but the most important thing is that pastoral, that people-to-people thing is going to be essential and even more valued and even more celebrated. And isn't that a good thing that we're actually celebrating human-to-human connection as opposed to just sticking people behind desks?
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree.
Think that's where we're going.
I think that's important too, because even in HR, we should know our people and get out as much as we can. If we're stuck doing lots of transactional stuff and we've got lots of deadlines, AI can take that away and we can focus on the high value stuff. And you're right, my GP practice it's not AI, but it has a platform where it asks loads and loads of questions, and it actually gives you, the doctor when it reads it can know what's wrong with you. And then they give you a telephone appointment depending on how severe it is, or they'll see you face to face, and it's open all day in their office hours, and they get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, depending on if it's really serious. They'll tell you to go to hospital straight away, of course. So it does actually look at, what it gives you an instruction of what to do at the end of it. And actually, I would rather use that than sit on the phone for 40 minutes to an hour to try and speak to a receptionist.
Hold music as well. Oh.
Why can't we? I love. If you take my daughter and son, they would never think about phoning the surgery. They go straight onto the app on their phones, type everything in, and get an appointment that way. Now, what you might want to do is multi-layer. So you might get somebody who doesn't want to do that, and they can use the phone service. Then there's AI options and app options for other people, and that just means you're servicing everyone.
Exactly, and I think this is where it's going to get really interesting. And I think one of the things that, we would say is, if you're thinking about, a career in HR, there's some really good things when it comes to employee engagement, well-being, diversity, inclusion, learning and development. There's some bad things in terms of having to get involved in difficult cases, having to get involved in slow response times, or a lack of personalized experience in certain situations, having to deal with a business as an entity as opposed to an individual, which is ideally what you'd want to do. And there's the ugly side of HR, which is like discrimination cases, employment law cases, and redundancies, and potentially the negative connections that people have to HR based on some of the bad side that we have to get involved in. But if you are interested in HR, it's very rewarding, isn't it, Wendy? There's more highs than lows, isn't there?
I would definitely agree with that. And in your team, you'll work with fantastic colleagues, and they will support you, nurture you, help you, problem solve with you. And HR people tend to be either quite detail oriented because they have a detail oriented job, or really, really peoply. And the combination of those two things, it's a wonderful job, actually, because we can accommodate whether you're technically competent and you want to go down that space, or whether you want to be really peoply, because we need both elements in our teams. And in your team, there's a lot of respect and working well together. And HR, I find, does it better than probably other departments. So that's why it's great to work in HR.
Thank you very much to Wendy for joining us today. Thank you for everyone that's joined us. Please make sure you like and subscribe to never miss one of our episodes. We will catch you on the next one. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.